We're now in that calm before the storm period where we're just about to experience the advent of the dApp era of Cardano. Meanwhile, on chain activity is already heating up. Architecture questions are being resolved, and all of crypto needs to prepare for coming battles over crypto regulation. Ready? Let's go. Got a few different things to cover today. We're going to talk about a little bit of a mini explosion in on-chain activity in Cardano. We're going to talk about how the approach to dApp architecture to optimize concurrency in an EUTXO system is solidifying. And we're going to talk a little bit about what we have to expect on the regulatory front. Hint, it's more this whole battle for the soul of crypto kind of thing. Recently, we saw this data from Masari get posted in infographic form. Good job on this, by the way, Cardano Daily. And of course, we saw a very strong reaction from the Solana people. Because if you go down the chart, you see here Bitcoin as the most active chain. And we'll talk about exactly what that means. Bitcoin is the most active chain, and then following close behind it, Cardano and Ethereum, and then a bunch of other coins we all know, with Solana nowhere in sight. And you immediately saw reactions like this: fake Solana is the most active chain. Here's the Masari chart called Most Active Chains. And they have a little byline here that says native assets ranked by the estimated on chain transaction volume in USD. And here it's filtered for transaction volume, 24 hours USD. So as we get on the list, we see this is sometime since that infographic was probably made, and there is some jockeying back and forth for position. So you see Bitcoin still in number one, Ethereum now in number two, Cardano in number three, and then a bunch of those very familiar coins we all know and love. And as we go down the list, I do not see Solana at all. We go clear down here to number 26. Solana, it appears, is not even on the list. How could this be? We hear so often about how Solana has so much going on, so many NFTs being traded on Solana. Why isn't Solana on this list? This adverse reaction gives away part of what's going on here, and we'll discuss the other part in just a second. But this poster said fake data. You can check it in CMC and CGs, referring to CoinMarketCap and CoinGecko. And this belies um, kind of a misunderstanding, a mistake that's very common in the crypto community. And that's that people look at the charts and they see transaction volume. And in the case of the columns I believe they're looking at in CMC and CoinGecko, what they're actually looking at is transactions on exchanges in that asset. It's like how often the big exchanges are people are, buying and selling that asset. That's a very different metric than how often the chain is actually being used. One is sort of a metric that reflects things like speculation. The other metric is actual use of the blockchain. And what this infographic and the Masari data is pointing to, I believe, is actual use of the blockchain. It's the dollar value of transactions actually taking place on the chain. I mean, that's what this is all about. This whole blockchain thing is about people transacting value and other things like information and identity. But, a large piece of it is value, people transacting value on the actual blockchain. It was never really supposed to be about how often people speculating trade an asset back and forth. It's always been about actually using the blockchains. And that's what a lot of people are misunderstanding. And, to be fair, a lot of blockchains are helping them to misunderstand that by, making a lot of commotion about transaction volume in exchanges. And that metric has, in a lot of ways overshadowed the more important metric, which is actual use of the blockchains. And to me, it's that second metric, actual use of the blockchains, that's going to determine which are the important blockchains in the future, really. Long term, that's going to be the important metric. And here, that's what the people are talking about in reference to Cardano being in that number 2 spot. And it looks like, as I check now, the number 3 spot, but it's, small difference. And the posters reacting so strongly to this don't understand the difference because they're both transaction volumes. It's just that one is a speculation transaction volume on exchanges. The other is actual transactions taking place on the blockchain. And for the other part of this confusion, it's important to understand that we're talking about it in USD value. I think the other piece of the confusion equation is explained by this post. I'm not talking about this one down here, although this is pretty genius. This guy is saying that Solana's transaction volume on chain will exceed everyone else when the VCs start selling. Very hilarious. I'm talking about this one up here. This is this post we previously covered on this channel. Just to reiterate, I haven't cared to do this research myself, so I can't vouch for the accuracy of any of these numbers. But this poster lays out a pretty detailed case that states that Solana's normal speed is about 2000 TPS, of which 80% are consensus messages. So if 80% of the transaction volume on the Solana network is actually just messaging to help the nodes achieve consensus. I mean, those kinds of that kind of like switching of data, those little data packets going around, they're not going to have USD dollar value. So if we're measuring transaction volume on chain, that if this is true, if 80% of the on-chain activity is just consensus messaging on Solana, that's not going to have a dollar value attached to it if it's just messaging, if it's just data. So if this is all true, it makes perfect sense that Solana is not even showing up on that chart at all. And if you ask me, my humble opinion, I'd much rather be in Cardano's spot where we've got this tremendous amount of actual dollar value of native assets being transferred across the blockchain versus Solana, where according to this poster, 80% is just consensus messaging and not value being transacted at all. To be fair, I haven't looked at all into the specifics of exactly how Messari is counting native assets estimated on-chain transaction volume in USD. And obviously there are a lot of different ways you can count that kind of thing, and it could bias the count against any particular blockchain. But if I were in a blockchain community that wasn't on this list and I thought my blockchain was a top 10 blockchain, I'd be asking some real hard questions about why our project wasn't showing up on this list. And if I heard that perhaps, according to that one poster, 80% of the on chain activity was just consensus messaging, again, I'd be asking some real hard questions about how much actual dollar value on chain activity was happening on my blockchain. If that was compounded by the fact that a gigantic proportion of my blockchain was owned by insiders and VCs, again, I'd be asking myself some real hard questions. But I don't know that we actually see that in that particular community. No matter how you want to slice those types of metrics, it looks like things are really heating up in Cardano. Here, ccvault.io is bringing to our attention that in Epic 302, Cardano reached over 1 million transactions in a single epoch. Yes, I'm pronouncing it epic. Sorry, I know some of you prefer epoch. I just like the way epic sounds. But the important thing is, an epoch is just 5 days. This is just 5 days. We did a million transactions in just 5 days. Everyone probably remembers that short period a few months ago when concurrency seemed like the biggest thing in the world. All of the Cardano haters, it's all they could talk about. Even all of us in Cardano, it was a hot topic of conversation for some period of time there. It got so bad, I thought I was going to turn on True Detective and find Matthew McConaughey complaining that the killer was obviously concurrency. It was all anybody was talking about. And here we are, just a couple of months later, and IOHK has dropped this article called Architecting dApps on the EUTXO Ledger by Jean-Frédéric Etienne. And he explains really carefully but concisely. It's not a long article. He explains really carefully and concisely exactly how you would create an order book in an EUTXO system. And it's not like, hey, maybe this will work. It's like, hey, here's one way you could do it. Here's exactly how it would work. And they even give you a link to code samples for avoiding concurrency using multi-signatures. And that multi-sig example is a part of the code written for the lobster challenge. This is one of the things I love so much about Cardano. I tend to bet largely on the jockey, not the horse. And in Cardano, we have so many smart people involved that this brand new problem in blockchains came up. It's like, how do you deal with concurrency in an extended unspent transaction output ledger? And in just a couple of short months, not only do we have like many possible approaches to deal with this that are actually being put into place by dApps that are soon to launch on the actual blockchain, but there's a whole article, and it's such a routine thing now that the article is not even that long, and it completely explains how you would do this order book in an EUTXO architecture. I love it. If we can conquer challenges like this so easily, I don't know if there's anything that can stop us. Having said that, the US federal government, if it regulates us the wrong way, can at least create some pretty serious stumbling blocks, which we'll also overcome. We would also be able to overcome them if those materialize. Charles dropped what he called a brief regulatory update today. And in this, he just gave us an update about what he knows that's going on in DC. He said, hey, as you all know, the bipartisan infrastructure bill contains some really bad crypto language. And it passed both the House and the Senate and was signed into law by the White House. And now that is set to become law. So he let us know, hey, there is a bill that is being introduced that would fix that language. But there's also going to be another bill introduced that would be something more like a comprehensive regulatory framework for crypto, or at least comprehensive from our perspective, in that it would kind of give us or attempt to give us what we've always wanted. That's a decent definition of certain fundamental threshold things, like what is a utility coin? If we say that a utility coin is not a security, what is that exactly? Just tell us. I think that's all we're asking for here. Just tell us what qualifies as a utility coin that's not a security so that Gary Gensler doesn't come knocking on our doors. Just tell us what it is and we can comply. But if you don't ever tell us how to comply, what threshold we need to comply with, we're not going to be able to comply. The bill to fix the bad language in the bipartisan infrastructure bill is coming to us, no surprise, from Senators Wyden and Lummis. We talked about them quite a bit in the last round of congressional battles over crypto related bills, and it was very obvious they were some of our most ardent supporters. The bill actually looks like this. You'll remember the big problem with the bipartisan infrastructure bill, crypto language, was that it designated pretty much everybody in crypto to be a broker. And those brokers were going to have reporting requirements, the Internal Revenue Code. And if you were somebody who like coded a crypto wallet or you were a block validator, it was super obvious to all of us in crypto that you weren't even going to have the information that you would need to report under the provisions of that bill. So this bill from Wyden and Lummis fixes that. You can see right here, it says, nothing in this section shall be construed to create any inference that a person described in this section of the IRS code includes any person solely engaged in validating distributed ledger transactions, selling hardware or software for which the sole function is to permit a person to control private keys, developing digital assets or their corresponding protocols. So this is just a very basic fix-it bill, which is going to exculpate block validators and basically, hardware or software platform developers from the provisions of that bill. Obviously, this isn't enough. We have a long ways to go before we reach a destination that looks anything like an acceptable regulatory framework for crypto in the US. I cannot lie, that second part is going to be another huge battle, probably even bigger than whatever battles we've already been through, because we've got a bunch of people in Congress, a bunch of regulators, and a bunch of people in the current administration, like the Dragon and all of the people we've talked about in past episodes on this channel, who really don't like crypto. They really just want to regulate crypto until it basically doesn't exist in any form that would be recognizable to us. They want to regulate crypto into extinction, basically, or it seems that way based on the rhetoric they keep spouting. But it's not really. The cool thing is, the good thing is that this doesn't have to be a partisan issue. And in fact, I don't think it's a partisan issue. Here we see a bunch of pro crypto Congress people, the same party as the dragon, as the dragon, writing a letter to the Speaker of the House, letting her know, hey, this language in the bipartisan infrastructure bill is no good. We need to change it. They're all the same party as far as I know, they're all the same party as the dragon. So I don't even think this is a partisan issue of any type. This isn't about right versus left. This is just about getting the regulations right so that the US doesn't get left behind. This is probably going to be a long, drawn out, and convoluted battle. Here's an example. Here we see Jerry Brito of Coin Center commenting on something put out by a congressperson on the House Agriculture Committee. You're probably thinking to yourself, House Agriculture Committee? Agriculture seems pretty disconnected from crypto, and that's logical. This congressperson is presenting a discussion draft of a Digital Commodity Exchange Act. And the reason is that the House Agriculture Committee has oversight of commodity markets. He says, we have an opportunity and responsibility to be leaders in the digital asset space to protect consumers, foster innovation, and reduce regulatory burdens. This act he's proposing can tackle those challenges. He's asking for feedback. This is how confusing and crazy this can get. But, you know, on the crypto side, we'll probably take whatever is best, whatever turns out best for crypto, whatever's most pro crypto, we're probably going to be cool with. And you see that here with Jerry Brito. He says this would be a much more sensible approach to crypto spot market supervision than giving the SEC jurisdiction, because we already know, despite the fact that Gensler taught crypto classes at MIT, he does not seem to be very pro crypto whatsoever. So we'll take whatever is most pro crypto, obviously. But you can see from the tone of these two posts, it's not even clear whether or not crypto should be regulated as a commodity, as a security, probably both. I think we're going to see regulators all getting sort of their pound of flesh, and, certain types of crypto futures contracts, could end up being commodities, while things that look like ICOs probably end up becoming securities. But at this point, the details in all of that are still unclear. What is clear is that for the foreseeable future, for the next several years, we're probably going to be in for some battles. Keep your fingers crossed for good outcomes there, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.